What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel, and you are watching the UFL Season 2 Defense Masterclass. In the latest gameplay, one of the hardest things to do is defend, and it is not all your fault because the fluidity on defense just isn't there like it needs to be to properly defend. That's why you see many opponents who will just cut left and cut right until they beat you, until your defender overcommits, right? There's even players that won't utilize any type of other skills. They'll take one player with the ball, typically a shiftier player on the ball, and just cut left and right until they can finally shoot and potentially score. But there are tips and tricks that you can utilize to better defend your goal and keep balls out of your net, and that is what we're going to go over today. So let's get into it. So first things first, I wanted to make sure you remember what I said just previously. Defense is flawed in this game, and that is because you can't properly jockey to keep up with the attackers. So no matter what you do, you are going to get beat from time to time. Just make sure you don't get frustrated and you understand this. Many times it won't be your fault, other times it will, and the times that you can control, that's what we're here to fix. Obviously, you're going to want to remember your typical defensive principles. Stay between the ball and the goal, right? As a defender, you want to make sure that ball is on the other side of you and the goal you're defending. Now, you see here in the background, I did a pretty good job of that. However, my opponent got a lucky bounce, and there's nothing I can do. Again, don't worry about the things you can't control. These things are going to happen. Now, the play you just saw, I blocked a shot, and then my opponent was able to essentially get a tackle back and could have scored, right? Even if he did, which I got lucky that he didn't, you just move on. This kind of thing is going to happen in the UFL. Not just block shots, but all different things. Again, control what you can, and then even if you get beat, you learn from it and you move on. Do not dwell on that one mistake. So, the next thing you need to know is where your opponent is trying to get the ball to create a scoring chance, which most of the time is into his striker or strikers, or in the middle of that 18-yard half circle. That is the sweet spot. As you just seen there, I was able to anticipate where the pass was going with my CDM, and I got to the intended target before the attacker could get the ball and create a potential scoring opportunity. These kind of things are the best way to prevent chances. You don't even let the attacker get the ball to take a shot. That is best case scenario. So to consistently do this, you always have to be aware of the attacker or attackers in this danger area and be switching between your defenders, your CDMs, or maybe even your center backs if you pull them up, ready to pounce and intercept a pass coming in, or at least tackle the attacker right away before he can shoot. And you want to keep this principle of anticipating and intercepting your opponent's passes all over the field. It's not just in that danger area. That is the most important area to prevent your opponent from getting shots. But the quicker you win the ball back, the quicker you can get back to you creating scoring chances and not your opponent. Now, if your opponent does complete the pass, which is going to happen, you have two options. You either do what you see my opponent do to me here and go for a blocked shot, which you kind of back off and try to get in the way of the angle the player is shooting, because there is no actual block shot feature. You see the defender kind of just gets in the way, right? But the problem with passive defending, where you kind of give the space and just try to get in the way of the shot, is that many times the attacker is going to be able to find that angle and get the shot on goal anyway. As you see, I cleanly score here without any type of pressure. So many prefer pressing the shooter and trying to tackle him before the shot can even go off, as you see my opponent did beautifully here. He saw what I was going for and just didn't even give me the chance. However, you just need to make sure you don't dive in so you don't get beat, as I did that to my opponent there after I knew he was going to be aggressive. Again, it's just a matter of making the right decision for each individual play, and it's a mind game with your opponent. Now, when you are away from your goal you're defending, you can either choose to drop back and put many players in front of the boxes. Many of the rats do, right? And the reason why it's ratty is because the defensive depth in this game is broken. So players realize if you just throw a ton of players in front of the box, they will sit back deep, midfielders right next to the defenders, and essentially, even if they're not good with their defensive skills, it will make it to where the opponent attacking their goal will essentially just run into a big wall of defenders. They won't even have to choose the defender. So I choose not to do that because I want to play skill football. I want to play the game as it was meant to be played. However, remember what I said, the depth is broken anyway, so sometimes, like in this case, what I believe to be this case, the opponent wasn't necessarily trying to just park the bus, if you will. It's just, since the depth's broken, he doesn't want to be a pressure defensive player. He wants to have more players behind the ball, which it worked for him there. And it doesn't matter either way whether your opponent is trying to purposely park the bus or just is trying to not play pressure defense and have players behind the ball as his choice of defending. You have to figure out how to beat it either way. That's what's in your control. As well as when you are on defense, you have to choose. Do you want to be a more pressure defensive player, which is what I choose, or do you want to have more players behind the ball trying to stop your opponent from getting in those dangerous areas? So if you choose to defend with more players behind the ball, you just still have to make sure you're on top of your player switching defensively, watching for passing lanes, watching for dangerous dribbling lanes, and trying to get the ball back without being impatient and pulling your players out of shape, which then opens up lanes for your opponent to exploit and attack. But being patient does not mean just waiting for your opponent to run into you and letting them essentially control the ball and decide if they're going to get a scoring chance or not. You still have to find that opportunity to make a tackle or to make an interception on a pass. Otherwise, what you see here will happen every time. The opponent will just continue to cut back and forth or pass around until they find an opening, and then boom, you get scored on. And the same thing goes for being a pressure defender, which is more of what I am. You're not just running around like crazy as fast as you can at the opponent trying to get the ball back. You are smart about it. You're putting your opponent under pressure, trying to rush their decisions, forcing them into a mistake, but you're doing it methodically. You're still looking at open dribbling lanes, open passing lanes. You're just actively closing those lanes down and not dropping back further. The reason why I do this is because I've always felt like if you drop back, you're inviting your opponent into more dangerous areas and you're giving them the control. Whereas when you put pressure on an opponent and then they make a mistake and you get the ball back, well, then you are in control and you are back on the attack. Almost like the best defense is offense. Obviously, coming from a former attacker, it makes sense, because if you're in control and then let's say you score another goal, that's just bigger hurdles for your opponent to climb. And then even if you do not win the ball back in advanced areas, the opponent still has to get all the way down to your goal and try to score still. So that concludes the defense masterclass for the current UFL Season 2 gameplay. As the game progresses, I will continue to provide you helpful tips on both sides of the ball. And last but not least, remember what I said at the beginning. Some things are out of your control. You're still going to concede. It's okay. Move on. Just work on these tips and I guarantee you will improve. Peace out.